Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Monday, the first day of July, 2024. So we have a new week and a new month ticking off right now. And let me tell you, do we have the stories? By the time we're finished today, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, you're going to be very glad that you are with the stories we're about to get to, because let's put it this way, we live in a very, very fragile world, and as the stories will indicate. Well, let's get to them. Today's top story is, of course, contrary to reports that Joe Biden is not dropping out of the race. Not at all. We have three stories, though, as to why it matters in the short term that Biden stays in office. And so we're going to look at those today. First headline, Biden's family tells him to keep on fighting. All right. Headlines galore, Washington Post, New York Times. New York Times had an insider at the meeting this weekend with Biden and his family. And he said basically Biden's family tells him to keep on fighting. Hunter Biden, one of the strongest voices, urging Biden to remain in the presidential race. Well, he has to because you got to pardon his felonious son there. Anyway, there's another headline. Democrats support Biden after debate performance. He's got two more swings. Now, let's remember something. The next debate is on September 10th, if it takes place. That's 10 weeks from now. Can you imagine how much Joe Biden will deteriorate in these next 10 weeks? He will not get better, whether he has Parkinson's, whether it be dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's, we don't know. Whatever it is, it's not good. But they say, well, we're going to give him two more swings as though he's going to get better next time. It's not that he had a bad night. It's to show that he just isn't capable physically of living up to the job. All right. So here's the question. What's the problem with a compromised individual staying in office for the next 7 months through the campaign and the election? What could possibly go wrong? Well, three headlines today are going to illustrate the problem. Headline number two today. First headline was Biden's family tells him to keep on fighting. Headline number two, U.S. military bases in Europe placed on heightened security alert. This is from Breitbart. Several U.S. military bases in European countries such as Germany and Italy were placed on an increased security alert over the weekend. Bases such as the U.S. garrison in Stuttgart, Germany, and the U.S. Army's Rheinland-Pfalz base and the U.S. Army's Ramstein Air Base were among the bases that were placed on a threat level of Charlie, according to the periodical Stars and Stripes. This came after the U.S. European Command, EUCOM, which is headquarters in Stuttgart, issued an increased threat level to Charlie. Other U.S. military bases, such as the one in Rheinland-Pfalz base in Baumholder, Germany, and bases in Romania, Bulgaria, and the Aviano Air Base in Italy, also increased their threat level to Charlie. According to the U.S. Army's website, Charlie is one of the 5 security levels in the force protection condition, FCOM, not DEFCON, but FCOM. The lowest level threat is normal, which is followed by alpha, which applies there's increased threat with possible terrorist activities against personnel or facilities, according to the U.S. Army website. Bravo is the third level, which applies to an increased or more predictable threat of terrorist activities. Here we go. After the Bravo threat is Charlie, the second highest threat level, and it applies when an incident occurs or intelligence is received that indicates some form of terrorist action or target against personnel or facilities is likely. All right, a United States official warned that the current threat level has not been seen in the last 10 years. The last 10 years. So right now in Europe, we have the worst threat level of some possible terrorist attack, the worst, threat in the last 10 years, according to the Central Command. But this is not all. Here's headline number 3. Not only in Europe, will Joe Biden debate debacle lead China to start World War III? This is by Gordon Chang, an expert on China, in the periodical The National Interest. China on Thursday evening saw a Joe Biden who at times looked dazed and confused, like the old Led Zeppelin song, and a challenger ready to confront Beijing. We have to be concerned that Xi Jinping sees a limited window of opportunity to achieve what he believes are historic ambitions. Personal attacks, hazy memory, mocking each other. This debate was very entertaining for many Chinese people, wrote China's most famous propagandist Hu Jing on X a few hours after the conclusion of the CNN presidential debate. Objectively speaking, the low-quality performance of these two old men was a negative advertisement for Western democracy. Was the much anticipated debate also a signal for Beijing to launch an invasion? Unfortunately, according to Gordon Chang, make that a yes. The official Chinese reaction was muted. China adheres to the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs and does not comment on issues related to the U.S. presidential election. Li Pengzhu, a spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., told Newsweek, at the same time, we oppose the U.S. frequently making an issue of China in the election. At the same time, China's propaganda machine predictably went into high gear, tarring everything about the event. But the most consequential criticism was voiced by Americans' friends and partners, as we've mentioned here, especially in Europe, who strongly favors Joe Biden, and even in the Middle East, where pro-American leaders are largely in former Donald Trump's camp. Chinese leader must have noticed that Biden's dreadful debate performance and the evident decline in his faculties. There's no question about that. Even before the event, Xi Jinping was arrogant, propagating the line that he's already in charge of the world. Change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years, the Chinese leader said in March of last year to Vladimir Putin, and we are driving this change together. Now Xi is bound to be even more bold. We do not know whether he's in fact made the decision to go to war, but he has obviously made the decision to risk war. Xi is risking war across China's eastern and southern periphery. In the Himalayas, Chinese troops have advanced deep into Indian-controlled land, and Beijing has announced claims to large portions of the neighbor's territory. In the East China Sea, Chinese vessels are swarming the Senkaku Islands, which Beijing, with little justification, claims as its own. In the South China Sea, China, in defiance of a dozen war warnings from the Biden State Department and the president himself, is engaging in bellicose activities against the Philippines. In the Taiwan Strait, Chinese planes and vessels regularly operate close to the island republic. They don't respect him, Trump said during the debate about Biden, referring to Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and Vladimir Putin. They don't fear him. The former president is right. Biden looked incapable Thursday night. Now, again, Taiwan is the real worry here. If Taiwan were invaded and taken over by China, the fallout would be unfathomable for as far as the world's concerned, with the technology that's there, that is in Taiwan, that basically controls so much of it. And it's just something we've talked about before. But bottom line is, Xi Jinping has 7 months. He sees an opportunity. It's obvious that there's no one really in charge. So will that happen in China? We do not know, but it is a risk. So we got not only the risk there in Europe, we have also the risk in China. But also there's another headline from the National Security Journal by a man named Michael Rubin. And these ones we list here, if you look at our YouTube page and also our website and our app, when we give these stories, we have a summary of them. We list where these stories are at, where you can find them, because these are stories you may want to read. We just summarize them in more detail because they give some very thorough illustrations to what we're talking about. Anyway, Biden, here's headline number 4. Joe Biden's mental fitness is a national security threat. This is from Michael Rubin from the National Security Journal. And here's what he says. Joe Biden is making America less safe. Many political debates come down to one line. President Gerald Ford's declaration, there was no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration, may have handed the presidency to Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter. I don't know if you remember that. Ford in the debate said there's no Soviet domination in Eastern Europe. There won't if he becomes president. He's president. Well, he's president. And of course there was. It'd been in the Iron Curtain there for years and years, and he lost to Jimmy Carter. In 1980, Ronald Reagan closed his debate with Jimmy Carter by asking, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? A simple question that juxtaposed the metaphorical forest with Carter's penchant for explaining the trees. Seeking re-election 4 years later, Reagan hobbled his challenger, former Vice President Walter Mondale, with his famous line, I will not exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience quip. And on and on and on. And a single line will not define as the article says, the June 27, 2024 debate between Biden and former President Trump, but rather the sheer spectacle of a president who appeared confused and unable to articulate even the simplest points, as we all saw this. All right. Democratic operatives might panic as they scramble to replace the incumbent and presumptive nominee, Biden, meanwhile, appears so far to be unwilling to drop his election bid, and that's the top story today. It seems that he is. This meeting yesterday with his family, he was told by his son Hunter and his wife Jill to go on, keep going, Joe. And so it looks like he's going to keep going. We'll see if he keeps going. There's so much opposition in his own party, like we mentioned, so many left-wing periodicals, papers, newspapers, New York Times, so was it the Chicago Sun-Times, the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, the New Yorker magazine, all told him basically quit now. You've got to quit. There's no way you can, win the election. People can't unsee what they saw on this last debate. And so he is making America less safe. Now, but here's the issue, and this is what the key is. The real storm might not be political. The ramifications of the exposure of Biden's incompetence is profound. America's adversaries are sophisticated. They readily factor America's political calendar in their decision making. Adversaries might hedge to formalize agreements before U.S. elections if they believe they could get a better deal from a new administration. Conversely, they might rush diplomacy if they fear the alternative, whoever is now in the White House. In other words, can you get a better deal now under Biden for the future, for the next 7 months? And if so, we have to rush something through. Or if we will wait till Trump comes in office if he wins, and then it'll be a lot better for us then, like Israel's situation. Enemies know that the United States is most distracted prior to an election or in the weeks after a new administration prepares to take office. Now, here's what's interesting. This writer gives a number of illustrations in the past where this has taken place, where the U.S. is distracted. For example, they often time attacks to maximum advantage. Libyan director Muammar Gaddafi bombed Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, in a short period between Vice President George Bush's 1988 election and his 1989 inauguration. By the time they found Libyan fingerprints on the attack, Reagan was already out of office. The length of the investigation undercut momentum for retaliation. Likewise, Russian President Vladimir Putin could have invaded Georgia at any time. That's the country, not the state, obviously. But he timed his assault to coincide with the U.S. election campaign between Senators Barack Obama and John McCain. George W. Bush was a lame duck, and the difficult legacy of the Iraq War undercut partisan will to trust Bush in his last weeks. Obama and McCain sparred over reaction with dueling press statements, but neither had the power to act. By the time Obama triumphed on election days, Russia's land grab was a fait accompli. Then in September 2020, it was Azerbaijan's turn as it invaded the self-governing Armenian region of Nagorno-Karabakh as Trump and Biden battled it out on the campaign. The president timed his invasion literally to get away with murder. So this is the point they're making. The stakes are higher this year, of course, and they go beyond the president being a lame duck. American enemies believe Biden is weak and enfeebled. Presidents and prime ministers who have seen Biden as both president and vice president have told me that he is not the same man. After the debate fiasco, Chinese media mocked Biden as habitually confused, and that seems to be the case, habitually confused. In fact, there are stories coming out for a number of White House insiders to Democratic periodicals, Democratic media saying we've known this for years. We're holding it back. The White House has held it back, how feeble and incompetent he is. And now we feel it's time to tell the world because we want to win the election, and they're not to mention what's going to happen possibly in the short term. Danger is looming. China, according to the article, China's made no secret of its desire to take Taiwan by force, and Russia openly covets not only Ukraine, but also Moldova and the Baltic states. Iran now may accelerate its efforts to overwhelm Israel directly or by proxy. The list of possibilities is longer. Maduro and Venezuela could invade oil-rich Guyana. Erdogan, in a similar position, might wipe out the Kurds in northern Syria. And Kim Jong-un, little rocket man, is volatile on the best of days, but the belief in U.S. paralysis may be too tempting for him to pass up. So here's how the article concludes. The Joe Biden problem is bigger than we realize. Biden's fumbles have started a clock towards a war across the globe, with adversaries and enemies having more than 4 months to exploit Biden's apparent mental incapacity. It's one thing to debate replacing Biden as nominee, but that may no longer be enough to keep peace. International security might now depend on the 25th Amendment governing presidential disability and succession. Now, here's this last line is going to scare you. Vice President Kamala Harris may not exude competence, but she is in charge of her own faculties, a low bar, but necessary one nevertheless. All right. So what do? Do you replace Biden now with Kamala Harris to put in the 25th Amendment, which is there to do that if you have a president who can't continue, or to just pretend that it's going to be okay and pretend that you can make it another 4 years, which nobody in their right mind believes something like that. But the real problem is what other countries may do: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. We just don't know. And this is a definite problem. And so here we are with 4 months before the election. Again, even after the election, you've got an aftermath of several months. It's almost 7 months by the time the new president is inaugurated, if it's a new president in January 2025. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But aren't you glad that you know Jesus if you're a Bible believing Christian? We document what's going to happen at the time of the end on our website, Educating Our World, where we have 65 books available for free download. Everything is free. 12 books on Bible prophecy, including our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end, where we thoroughly go through the signs that the Bible gives about the time of the end. And as we've said, we see of these 25 signs, 70 specific fulfillments of predictions among these signs have taken place already, and 30 more are in process. So the Lord is in control. We know that for a fact. And so be of good cheer. It's going to get tougher and tougher. But we know the end game. The Lord Jesus Christ will indeed come back and set up his kingdom. But in the meantime, literally, only God knows what's going to happen. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.